We're going live. All right. We are live, everyone. Hello. Happy Wednesday. My name is Gina Veramo. I'm the outreach manager for NOVA, and I'm going to be your host this afternoon for our spiciest field trip yet. So stay tuned. This is the fourth and final field trip inspired by our newest chemistry series, Beyond the Elements, which was a 3-part look into the fascinating chemistry that makes our world and everything in it. So over the last 3 months, we've extracted DNA from strawberries. We've explored the properties of glass, and we got a very robust tour of the periodic table of elements. And today we are going to bring the heat. I'm sure it's happened to you before. You're cooking at home or you're eating at a restaurant and you all of a sudden eat something that's maybe a bit too spicy for you. Maybe your tongue starts to tingle, maybe you start to sweat, or your eyes water, or your nose runs, or maybe all of the above. I know it's happened to me. But what's happening in our body when that happens? And why do we keep coming back for more? But today, we're going to take a look at some of the different peppers and explore the science of spice with our very special guest, Dr. Ivette Guzmán, the assistant professor of horticulture at New Mexico State University. So we're going to take a look at some peppers today and talk about spice. So if you have any questions for our guest over the course of our time together, please drop them in the Q&A section if you're joining us via Zoom, or in the comments on Facebook or YouTube, and we'll try to get to as many as possible during our time together. So with that, Ivette, I'm going to pass it off to you. What are we looking at today?
Hi, thank you, Gina, and welcome everybody from across the globe. I'm so excited you tuned in. And I have to say, when it's about peppers and it's about chili and capsaicin and the heat, that's one thing I think really bridges people across cultures, because every culture has a spicy food that they love. And so that's one thing that we can all kind of gather around, is that there's something about eating something hot that is exciting, that is kind of addictive. It's almost a little dangerous. And so I think that's what's really cool about it. So I'm an assistant professor here at New Mexico State University, and that's in New Mexico, southern New Mexico, USA. And I'm in my lab. So this is our lab here. We do a lot of chili quality. We extract compounds from all fruits and vegetables, really. I work with other fruits and vegetables as well, although chilies are my favorite. And so we do everything here in the lab. So I thought this would be a really great setting to show you some chemistry, and then I'll give you a little tour of some of the instruments that we use to actually measure these compounds. So you guys know that really chili is one of the most important crops, vegetables and spice crops in the world. And they originate from South America, actually. So thousands of years ago, that's where they started. And birds picked up seeds from South America and took them across up to North America and also the Caribbean. And that's where some of the chilies were domesticated. So they were growing wild in South America. Birds actually don't have the receptors to feel the heat. So they're okay with super spicy chilies. And so birds actually sent them, took them to the Caribbean and to Mexico, and that's where they were domesticated. So we have the genus for chilies is capsaicin. So that's the genus. The family is Solanaceae. It's actually in the same family as tomatoes. But they're very different from tomatoes. Tomatoes aren't hot. The genus is capsicum. There are 32 species that have been discovered, but there's only 5 of them that are domesticated. Okay, and I have a couple here. So, wherever you're at, you can probably guess what kind of pepper this is. This is a bell pepper. So this is a capsicum annuum. So the species is annuum. And the annuums were domesticated in Mexico. Okay. And then this is a jalapeno. Okay, this is probably one of the most popular spicy ones. This is also an anum. So the anum species is actually pretty large. Okay, we have some more anums. This is what some people call Anaheim. Here in New Mexico, we call it the New Mexico pod type. So before it became Anaheim, this was actually developed here in New Mexico, here at New Mexico State University in 1909. Fabian Garcia, an immigrant from Chihuahua, was the first chili breeder in the US. He was the one that came up with this pod type. And then from here, it was taken to California and renamed Anaheim. And then we have poblano. Okay, poblanos are really good for chile rellenos. You slice them up, you put some cheese in there, yum. These are also anums. And then I know what, I bet some of you guys know what these things are. These are these dangerous habaneros. So the species for these are actually chinense. So these are capsicum chinense. So these were domesticated in the Caribbean. And then this is an interesting one. This is called Hungarian wax pepper, which is also an anum. So the most common are going to be the anums and the chinenses. And then there's also Tabasco is a frutescens. And then we also have capsicum pubescens and bacatum. So those are like the 5 main peppers that are domesticated. So let's talk about which one is the hottest one that I have here. And I picked these up at the grocery store here in Las Cruces, New Mexico. So definitely the hottest one we have here, which you can probably guess which one it is. And it's the habanero. Okay, so the habanero is the hottest one I have. And this habanero probably ranges, if you're a chili head is somebody that loves spicy peppers. We call them a chili head. I'm definitely a chili head. Habaneros are going to be between 200 and 300,000 and 2 million Scoville heat units. And a Scoville heat unit is how we measure how hot something is. There was a guy a pharmacist in the early 1900s here in the US, Wilbur Scoville. You know, if it wasn't for him, we would not know how to measure how hot things are. And he actually set up a panel of people that would tell him how hot something was. And so that was called the Scoville test. So he had people tasting things and being like, okay, this one's hot, this one's not hot. Now, because we have a lot of instruments, we have a lot of analytical chemistry instruments, we can actually measure exactly how hot it is, but we still use that terminology, Scoville heat units. So this says 300,000, and then some of the really hot ones like Carolina Reaper or Trinidad Scorpion can be up in the millions. Okay, so the next hottest one I have is going to be the New Mexico pod type or Anaheim. These can range anywhere between 100 to 10,000 Scoville heat units. And there's just so many different varieties of these. You know, when you go to the grocery store, it might say mild, medium, or hot. So they can range. There's a big range. Okay, the next one I have here is going to be the jalapenos. Okay, so the jalapenos are the next hottest ones. And so these are going to be between 3,000 and 10,000. Okay, they can also big range. Okay, and then the next one is going to be the Hungarian wax, which can also range between 1,000 and 15,000 Scoville heat units. And then the next one is the poblano, a little bit of heat, not too much. And then of course, the ones that have no heat and are completely safe, if you can't handle the heat, is bell peppers. Okay, so these actually don't have any heat. And what's really cool about bell peppers is that bell peppers are mutants. These are little mutants. They actually do not have the gene. They don't have that DNA to make the hot compounds. And so that's really cool. The gene is a recessive gene, which means you have to have 2 copies of this gene in order for it to not produce any of these hot compounds. So when I'm talking about hot compounds, what exactly am I talking about? Okay, I'm talking about these 2 compounds here. You can see them. So these compounds, capsaicin and dihydrocapsaicin, are going to be the 2 compounds that are very hot. And I have a model here. And so this is a model of capsaicin. And so plants are chemical factories. They produce these intricate structures of carbon atoms and hydrogen atoms and nitrogen atoms, and to make these structures. And these are the structures that bind to our cells. Specifically, capsaicin binds to some of our nerve cells. Okay, and that's where we feel all of that heat. So what I'm going to do today is first I'm going to put on gloves. So when you're dealing with hot stuff, making salsa, whatever, know your peppers. If you don't know how hot something is, Google it. Type in the type of pepper, Scoville heat units. If it's above 5,000, just be careful. You could really burn your skin. This compound binds to receptors in your cells that are sensitive to temperature. So when this binds to a cell in your body thinks it's 125 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is the same as 125 degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so is that something you want to put on your skin? No, you will burn yourself. Okay, so let's see, which one should I cut up? Let's start with let's start with the jalapeno, because I love jalapenos. So one thing I want to show you is where is the spicy stuff.
Yes, a lot of everyone wants to know.
Yeah. So a lot of people think it's in the seeds. Don't eat the seeds because those are hot and those are going to burn you. Guess what? It's not in the seeds. The seeds do not produce capsaicin. So what's going to produce capsaicin is the placenta. Did you guys know chilies had placentas?
I didn't.
Yeah, chilies have placentas. And so here, as I'll show you, is so the white is the placenta.
Oh, that's what that is?
Yes. So that's what's holding on to the seeds. So the seeds hold on to the placenta. They're attached to the placenta. When you cut your pepper, you see how the seeds are like right on the placenta. When you cut this pepper, you're cutting the placenta. That placenta is full of blisters. Those blisters have the capsaicin in them. So when you cut your pepper, you're slicing up those blisters, you're popping them, and the capsaicin's getting all over the seeds. And so that's why people think the seeds are spicy.
Yeah, because you even see it in recipes all the time. Like, depending on your spice level, deseed your peppers or not. But I guess you really should be thinking about removing that placenta or that white pith instead.
Yeah, so if you're dealing with a really hot pepper, you want to be able to cut it without damaging the placenta too much, because the more you cut that placenta in the middle, the more you're going to release these compounds. And if you want it to not be hot, you could always just pull that placenta out. Just pull that white placenta out. And so here's actually microscope pictures showing the placenta and where these blisters are. So those are the seeds. You can see that the blisters are not on the seeds. They're actually on the part that's holding on to the seeds. They're on the placenta. I mean, I just think those blisters look dangerous.
They definitely do.
And so and this is another picture I want to show you. This is a transmission electron microscope picture showing the blisters. So if you pop those things, you're releasing all of that toxin. I mean, it really is a toxin. Peppers produce these compounds, so we don't eat them. So the seeds are protected. So we don't eat the seeds because the seeds are going to is what you grow, right?
Right.
So it's a protective mechanism. But with humans, we're a little crazy. We're addicted to that. Like, we like dangers. So, the chilies are trying to protect their seeds, and we're like, give us some more of that dangerous compound. That's what we like. And the reason we like it so much is because whenever these compounds bind to our receptors, we feel the heat, and then afterwards we feel endorphins. Endorphins are released, so you actually feel a little pleasure after eating. Okay, so let's cut up the habanero. I almost feel like I should wear double gloves for this.
How about glasses? There's not anything like onions where it like off gases and gets in your eyes or anything like that, right? Or can that also happen with spicy peppers?
Yes, it can also happen with spicy peppers. So they can be a little volatile. When I was a graduate student, when I was a PhD student, we were looking at some of these capsaicinoids, these hot compounds in chili, and we had a lot of these chilies. We call them super hots, like a lot of the super, super hot chilies. We just call them super hots. We actually would dissect them in the fume hood.
Wow.
With goggles. And I'm feeling a little better now, but if I chop up too many of those hot ones, I start getting like rashes on my cheeks because I've developed a sensitivity to it. So here is
your body's way of saying, like, please stop. Like,
yes, that's my body saying, okay, lady, you are going to really burn yourself. So here is, I can even smell it. Like that habanero smell?
Yes.
So look at this placenta. What's interesting about this is that there's placenta everywhere. It's not just, with the jalapeno, it was kind of in the middle. Right. But what's interesting with the chinenses or the habanero types is that there's like placenta here. It's all over the fruit wall. So this is the fruit wall. The placenta is all over the fruit wall. I can almost see the blisters from here. So that's what makes the super hot, is that the blisters in some of these peppers are found all over the fruit, not just the placenta, it's everywhere. And so that's what's going on with this guy here. So that's actually what I wanted to show you. I don't know if you guys have any questions. There's also some other compounds in chili. I talked about the 2 capsaicin, which is the important one. But chilies actually make 20 other capsaicinoids, and some of these other ones are actually not spicy. They don't give you that heat. So not a lot is known about those capsaicinoids. We definitely need more chili scientists to help us understand, and pharmacists and researchers looking at pharmacology to understand how these other 20 capsaicinoids could maybe even help us treat certain diseases, because they're not hot, but yet they still bind to our receptors in our body. So that's something I wanted to point out. And so just a little bit of background. I know we might have some, I think there was a faculty member on this that I saw log in, but capsaicinoids are alkaloids. In case you're like a chemistry person, they are alkaloids. And one thing I wanted to mention was, whenever we talk about heat, there's a heat profile. So whenever we say, this pepper's hot, this pepper's not hot. Actually, heat has a lot of different layers to it. Mm-hmm. And this is what has helped different cultures and different cuisines find the right pepper for them. So for example, if you were to eat a spicy dish in China, that heat might be different than a spicy dish in New Mexico. And that's because the combination of these compounds give us different sensations in our mouths, and different cultures and different cuisines have picked out what kind of sensation they want. Some peppers, for example, like jalapeno, it will give you a sting on the tip of your mouth. So if you're eating a salsa and you're like, oh, I wonder what kind of pepper's in here. If it stings on your lips, then it might be a jalapeno. If it stings in the back of your throat and it's delayed, then it's probably a habanero. So there's different things that these heat compounds do in your mouth, and each pepper is going to have a different sensation. And I think that's what's super cool. And we actually have a paper that we wrote about this. We did a research article on this, telling you like how the different heat profiles affect your mouth.
That's so cool that the peppers just kind of like evolved that way to impact our bodies differently. Yeah. Plants are the coolest. And we have a bunch of questions.
Okay.
So one of the questions we have from Jean is there a relationship between liking and tolerating a pepper's heat and a person's ethnic background?
Yes, definitely. Like I was mentioning about how the peppers in China are going to give you different heat sensations than the hot peppers here in the US. Definitely there's a cultural impact, and there might also be a biological difference. It's known that some people have extra receptors to taste bitter, to taste the bitter flavor, and some people don't have those receptors. And so that could be something similar that's going on here, is that people from certain parts of the world might have some receptors that can detect. We have 22 different capsaicinoids. So there could be a biological reason why Chinese people like a certain type of heat, and Americans like a certain type of heat, and Mexicans like a certain type of heat. But I think also it's cultural. So I think it might be a combination of the two.
Cool. We also have a couple other questions thinking about, just to clarify, some folks want to know, so if you remove all of the placenta from a habanero, does that mean that it won't be spicy? Or can the blisters be washed during cleaning or prep?
Yes, they can be washed. The only thing with the habanero is that placenta is kind of fused with the wall, and the wall for the habaneros is pretty thin. And so you might get some placenta, that's fused with the wall. So it might be difficult. You could try just like scraping it, like popping all the blisters and then washing it. I think you could dramatically reduce the heat. And I actually love habaneros because they're so flavorful. They're floral, they're beautiful. And so you could try doing that. I don't think you could get rid of all of it, but you could get rid of some.
Someone else, Yumi, would like to know, what's the difference between the spiciness of certain peppers and that of like horseradish or wasabi? Are they similar, and why do we react differently?
Yeah, so they're actually different compounds. Capsaicin, it's named capsaicin because the genus of peppers is capsicum. So capsaicin's only in chili peppers. And so horseradish is going to have other compounds that are sulfur based. And so they're going to also give you heat. There's these receptors can bind a lot of compounds, but it's a different heat.
Excellent. Cool. We also have another question. Is the differences between the different anum varieties can be explained solely by the variation in gene expression, or are there other differences?
Yeah, so gene expression is really the main one. So I have a lot of anums. There's so many anums. that have been domesticated. And so, yes, it's all going to be in the DNA. And so the DNA is going to determine what the pepper tastes like and the capsaicin. Environment can also impact it. For example, I talked about how like these New Mexico types range,
Right.
And heat, and that also the environment will influence it. So if you grow this in a stressful environment, like lots of sun, maybe some water stress, you can increase the capsaicin amount. So most of it's genetic, but some of it's environmental as well.
Cool. So it's kind of speaking of where you're growing. I see a comment from folks that are growing peppers at home. And Mark wants to know that, so he grows a lot of peppers each year and he ends up with a whole lot of them. So he ferments them into hot sauce. So what happens to the capsaicin chemically through that process? Why is it that it stays intact and the sauce remains hot while you add, other things like vinegar, cumin, maybe some other spices?
Yeah, it'll stay there. I mean, it's not going anywhere, but you can modulate the heat by what other compounds or what other things you add to your sauce, your salsas, right? You can add, a lot of people add carrots, to sweeten it up. So, when we're talking about flavor and heat, there's a lot of stuff going on in your mouth. There's a lot of olfactory stuff going on in your nose.
Yeah.
And so you can modulate the heat quite a bit, but the capsaicin will stay there.
Someone wants to know, do you know anyone that's ever eaten a Carolina Reaper? And what about the ghost chili?
Yes. I was just telling Gina before you guys came into the room about something that happened here with one of our students. So I work a lot with the Chili Pepper Institute, which is an awesome resource, put in a plugin for them. And every year they have a garden that's got 150 different varieties of chilies from all over the world. And we give our students from New Mexico State University, we give them a tour. And so there was one class with a graduate student teaching assistant. So he was out there with like 20 students, and one student, they said, okay, I think it was this Trinidad scorpion. He said, don't, be careful. This is like 2 million Scoville heat units. It'll burn you. And a student was feeling, I don't know, like a daredevil. So he took a bite of it in the field. It was like 100 degrees outside. He took a bite and he threw up all over the plants in the field, and then he passed out. So, and so they had to like drag him over to the shade and give him water. And I think he had a really bad stomach ache for like 24 hours. So be careful that these are poisonous.
That's just crazy to think that we love poisoning our bodies.
Yeah.
Which kind of leads me to a question, thinking about spicy food and our health. So, I don't know if I'm sure you've probably seen it. There's a YouTube series called Hot Ones where they eat all of those like very spicy hot sauces progressively. I mean, what is that doing to our body over time, to just continually expose it to that poison? Like, is that okay? Are we like slowly breaking things down? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah, so you do have receptors all over your body that can sense capsaicin. So the same ones we feel in our mouths, we have in our stomach. So we can feel capsaicin everywhere. And if you had really hot salsa for dinner, and then the next day you'll feel it everywhere, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you eat too much, then there does come a point where your body starts to get desensitized by it. Your nerve receptors start getting used to it. You can no longer trigger it's kind of like an addiction, right? You can no longer trigger that heat response like you used to, which is not good, because if you can't feel it anymore because you're desensitized, these compounds are still binding. They're still producing that burning sensation. So you can hurt yourself. You can hurt your membranes. You can hurt your nerve cells.
Wow. So you could you could, like train your tongue to eat hotter peppers, but we're really, really pushing against nature on that one. Probably not doctor recommended.
No. And I think that's what a lot of the chili heads do is, they just train themselves to eat this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. If you've ever watched one of those hot pepper contests, oh my God, it's incredible. Or just horrifying. Maybe not incredible. That might not be the right word. Okay, so we also have some questions. Paul wants to know, can you tell us a bit about chili peppers and their use in pain relief?
Yes. So that is actually probably the reason why they were domesticated in the first place. So people in the Caribbean and New Mexico probably found that there's something in these peppers that's medicinal. So there's a lot of antibacterial properties and also a lot of pain relief. There are products on the market that are even called capsaicin, and you apply them and like topically, and they can help with muscle pain. And there's been some research showing that it could help with some stomach pain, but that has a lot to do with like the dosage.
Yeah.
I know some horse people. I recently did an interview for Nova on how horse trainers were using it to help with horse muscle pain. And so if you are feeling pain, muscular pain, then maybe applying some of this habanero a little bit, but a lot of it has to do with dosage. So you want to be careful.
Yeah. I feel like that's something you'd want to talk to a professional first before you rub a habanero on anything that you need.
And that's why some of those creams are good, because those creams have already figured out the exact dosage to help.
Someone else, Joette, would like to know, you see a lot of stuff, on the internet, maybe in, public health or in health magazines that eating hot peppers can increase your metabolism. Is it true that you burn more calories when you eat hot and spicy food or hot peppers, or is that a myth?
Yeah, there has been some research showing that it does increase your metabolism. And I think some of that's because it increases the temperature of your body. That's why we sweat whenever my dad used to eat a lot of really hot stuff, and he would just sit there and he'd just be like sweating and sweating. His body's trying to cool him down. So it does increase your heat and the metabolism. It could be increased. I think there was a study showing that it could increase your longevity. Like you could live longer. I don't know about that, but I think with some metabolism, it could help.
Cool. So also thinking about chemistry, we're talking about some of the pain that you get when you eat a hot pepper. Let's talk about, relieving some of that sensations. Folks say, to drink milk or heavy cream or eat rice and not drink water. So what's the chemistry behind relieving that sensation?
Yeah. So if you're consuming it, a way to decrease the heat when you're eating it is to drink milk before you eat it.
Oh.
And so milk actually helps bind up some of those receptors before you eat the hot stuff. If you already ate it, then drinking milk afterwards could help. The one thing you do not want to drink at all is water. It's better to not even drink anything. If all you have is water, just hold it out. Water does make it worse. Same if you have it on your skin. Put some oil, like lard if you're cooking, or olive oil. Do not wash your hands in water.
Good to know. We've got a whole bunch more questions, y'all. Thank you for being so engaged. If you have any more questions, put them in the Q&A or put them in the comments, and we'll try to get to as many more as we can. Someone would like to know, Edward would like to know, how's the traditional hotness test conducted?
The traditional one that Wilbur came up with? So
he doesn't specify, so sure.
Okay, probably the Wilbur test. I like his name, Wilbur, but so he had a panel of trained people. And so they would start from the point that a person could not taste any heat, and then they would work up from there. So then if you didn't taste any heat, like for example, in bell peppers, that would have a 0. And then you would just rate them going up. And it was very sensory. It was very simple. Now that we have our instruments, we are able to measure the exact amounts. So we know that if there's if the traditional way of rating a pepper would be like a number 1, we know that translates to 16 parts per million capsaicin. So we actually have a ratio of how to compare the traditional sensory evaluation with the chemistry part.
Cool. And Bob would like to know, do the Scoville measurements apply to the flesh, the seeds, and the placenta, or the average, or how are we picking the Scoville measurements?
Yeah, so the whole thing is dried. So whenever if you send your jalapenos to a testing company that's going to test for you, they pretty much dry it down and they extract the whole thing.
Cool. Going quickly back to the water question, folks want to know why is water in particular so like the one thing to avoid? What is it about the water and that reaction?
Yeah. So capsaicin is kind of it's in these oily blisters, and so you can kind of see them here. I mean, they look like oil, and so oil and water do not mix. And so what you're doing is, if you're flushing it with water, the oil, these molecules are going to bind stronger to the receptor, and they're not going to get like diluted off. But if you use like oil, like vegetable oil, that could actually help wash it off, because the capsaicin will like the oil.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's I never knew that. Someone else would like to know, Caroline would like to know, how did you get interested in hot peppers?
That's a great question. So I grew up, I'm Mexican. I grew up eating hot peppers. There's a lot of stories my mom can tell you about eating serranos with my burritos when I was like 5. And I've always liked plants. I didn't know, right? Like, who knows that you could be a plant scientist and much less a chili scientist, right? But I think whenever I went to college, I actually wanted to be pre-med. Like most Mexican families, you either become an engineer or you become a doctor. And so I was pre-med, and I took a class in undergrad. It was a medicinal plants chemistry class. And I was like, oh my God, all of these like medicinal plants that my grandmother's been using in Mexico, all of this, there's like chemistry to it. Like, this isn't just tradition, which is important, right? Tradition is important, but there's chemistry, there's real science to it. Right. So whenever I was looking for a doctoral program, I actually came here to New Mexico State University for my PhD. And I worked with Dr. Paul Boslin, the amazing chili breeder, and another professor, Dr. Mary O'Connell, and they were working on chilies. And I had that connection because of growing up with chilies. And then understanding the chemistry, and the chemistry behind the chili chemistry is super, super cool. And that was it. It was like my past and my science career had, married into one.
That's awesome. Very similar. What's your favorite pepper?
Oh man, that's a tough one. Man, I guess I know. I didn't expect anybody to ask me that. I like, this is from a chili head. This is going to sound pretty bland, but I actually love bell peppers. I mean, look at these colors. So that's one thing I didn't talk about, was peppers are different colors. And actually the colors of peppers are also super good for you. And you can't taste them. They're just colorful. But the color signifies that it's got vitamins. And so I love that when I'm eating a bell pepper, and they're so beautiful and they're sweet, they're just jam packed with vitamins. And so
Mm.
I love bell peppers. I could eat them like every day. And then I also, of course, like the New Mexican pod type because they're different heat levels. You can make all kinds of food with them. And we grow them here in New Mexico.
Yeah.
So that hot arrow. We'll have to move it out of the way.
Yeah, go ahead, move it out of the way. Another question that I have. So how does capsaicin impact flavor? So like, because I feel like at one point a lot of times, sometimes a food can be so spicy, it just doesn't taste like anything anymore. You're just feeling heat and you're not actually getting flavor. So do we find that the spicier the pepper is, the less like flavor it has, and it's really just about that heat, or is that not a thing?
Yeah, and so flavor, when we're talking about flavor, we're talking about like maybe sweetness. So we have a lot of different flavor receptors on our tongue that can sense sweetness, salt, bitterness. And so those compounds are going to be really different from the capsaicin. So they're two independent things. I think a lot of times peppers are bred for heat. And so they're bred to be hot, hot, hot. And they're not really, and then breeders aren't really looking at flavor. And so I think there is a way to breed for flavor and for heat together. I think a lot of times they're kind of bred or developed for one or the other.
Mm-hmm. So if folks are, we have a couple of people that are growing their own peppers, and someone wants to know, so I've often found that peppers of the same variety from the same garden vary in hotness. And why does that happen?
Yeah, so one thing you want to make sure is, when you buy your seed packets, this has happened to me before, I buy a seed packet and then I grow them out and I'm like, wait, they all look different. It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes you could get a packet that's got, mixed seeds in it by accident. So that's one reason. If they look the same, but they're tasting a little different or the capsaicin's a little different, it could be that the peppers could be segregating. And so that's when we have like maybe a hybrid and then they kind of grew out different. So the genetics could be a little different. But also, like I mentioned, environment stress could affect the heat. And so if maybe one plant is getting more sun than the other one, or maybe getting chewed up by insects, it's creating some type of stress on a plant, then it could be hotter. So you could have a situation still, even if they're in the kind of the same location.
And another person would like to know, how do I best store my peppers to maintain their heat?
Yeah, well, I really like the idea of making salsas or making some type of sauce. That's my favorite way to do it, and it's you just can it and then you can, or freeze it. Another thing you can do, we do a lot of this in New Mexico with these green ones, is we roast them. We roast them outside in like on a grill, and we get them, the outside gets nice and like blistery, and then we just pull off the outer toasted layer, and then we put them in baggies and we freeze them. And then they're kind of semi-cooked already, and then you just freeze them and they'll last years in the freezer if you roast them.
I'm reading through our questions because more keep coming in. So please continue to keep them coming if you have more questions. Sorry, I'm scanning them because we just got a bunch that came in. Okay. Bob wants to know, if the heat keeps the fruit or seeds from being eaten by animals, how do you know what's the evolutionary advantage for a pepper of being hot?
Yeah, so they will keep the seeds protected until a pepper gets ripe, right? Until a pepper is fully ripe, And then that, once the pepper's ripe, that's going to attract herbivores to eat it. And then we can help disperse seed. But it really is protecting the seed more than anything. It wants the seed to mature. If we were to eat a lot of these peppers that we eat, when they're green, the seeds are not viable. So we eat these, but the seeds, if you were to plant those seeds, they wouldn't grow. So you need the pepper to fully mature until they're like fully ripe and red and shrivelly and almost dry. And then, the seeds are ready to be planted. So it tries to protect the pepper from being consumed as long as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But, humans, we're crazy. We will eat it at any stage. It doesn't quite work out like that,
So I guess in a similar question, Mark wants to know, is there a level of capsaicin saturation where your tongue or skin just would not notice anymore? So could you get to a point with a super hot pepper where it just wouldn't matter and they're all just painfully hot? Yeah.
Yes, I think there is a point. I mean, I don't know. I think it varies, like from person to person. I know for me, if I get to about maybe close to 100,000 Scoville heat units, I'm done. I'm toast. I can't feel anything. It's kind of like you go into kind of like a shock thing. You just become numb, and it just that's my experience. But if you consume it and it's beyond the point that it hurts, you will throw up. You will pass out. And so that's where you don't want to get to that point, because that's when your body's going to react like you just ate poison, like you've been poisoned. And that's what happens when you can't feel the pain anymore. I know.
Someone else wants to know, going back to your favorite pepper, the bell pepper, what are the vitamins that are in them, and like, are there different vitamins in each variety?
Yes. Okay. So this is my other thing I like to talk about. I actually have a little, chemistry pathway here.
Great.
This is, these are actually all the different vitamins that are colorful. And so this is why I love bell peppers so much. It's because they have reds, oranges, and yellow compounds, but these compounds are antioxidants. Mm-hmm. The orange one is beta carotene, which is it makes gets converted to vitamin A in our stomach. So we all need vitamin A. The yellows are lutein and zeaxanthin, among others. And these guys, those yellow compounds, are actually good for our eyes. They coat our nerves, our ocular nerve behind our eye. These compounds actually coat it like a protective layer. And so whenever we look at screens or blue light, it actually protects our eyes from that damaging screen blue light. And so those are really good. And then the reds, peppers make two compounds that are unique, called capsaicin and capsaicin, which are very strong antioxidants. There's even research showing that it could help protect against cancer or free radicals in our environment. And so any pepper that's got color is going to be good. So think of orange as beta carotene, yellow for your eyes, and red for antioxidants.
Awesome. Someone else would like to know, so thinking back to our gardeners here, we got a lot of gardeners in this, which is great. Does the time at which I pick a pepper, like its ripeness, affect the heat level?
No. I mean, as long as the pepper has grown to the largest size possible, then you're done producing the capsaicin amounts.
Cool.
So it doesn't increase as it ripens. As long as it's the largest size, even if it's green, that's it.
And thinking about our gardeners here as well, they want to know about, growing peppers organically versus, using some sort of other pesticide. If you grow them organically versus non-organically, is that going to impact their flavor or heat in any way?
No, it's not it's not about the organic versus conventional. It's more about stress. Sometimes, and this is a very generalized comment, organic fields sometimes have a little bit more stress. They might have more weeds. You're not using herbicides, so there might be more weed pressure or more insect pressure, which is something that maybe organic farmers want because they want to create like a permaculture type setting. And so those environments will increase the capsaicin level, but it's again more on the environment and the stress that the plants are getting, not necessarily if the herbicide is organically certified or not.
Cool. That's great to know. And someone else wants to know, Jimmy from Facebook wants to know, what's the Jamaican Scotch bonnet's scientific name? I love the fruity taste and heat of this pepper, but I have trouble finding seeds in the US. Can you direct folks like where they can get seeds or seedlings too?
That is such a beautiful pepper. I have to say, I don't eat it a lot because it's not part of my culture. But like Caribbean cuisine has a lot of the Scotch bonnet, and it's a beautiful pepper. I think it smells so good. It's floral. It's wonderful. It's very hot. But I think the best place to get seeds, I would recommend the Chili Pepper Institute. And so they actually have a couple of Scotch bonnets. So if you look up capsicum chinense, so like Chinese, like chinense, even though they were domesticated in the Caribbean, the species is chinense. And the Chili Pepper Institute has a lot of different chinense seeds. It has a little description of how hot it is, what the flavor is. We even have one at the Chili Pepper Institute called Trick or Treat. And that is actually a habanero chinense that has the Scotch bonnet flavor, but has no heat. It has that weird recessive gene from bell peppers that Dr. Boslin put into a chinense. And so that one's called Trick or Treat. And that one is just beautiful because you can add all of the floral flavors but without the heat to your recipes.
Oh, I love that. For someone that like, I know I can't handle a Scotch bonnet level heat, like that would be lovely.
Yeah.
We have a question about habaneros. So what's their original color? So at the store, I'd never know which to grab because you can see yellow or red or orange. So is there a difference in the color? Does it matter?
If the pepper, usually peppers go through like color stages as they ripen. So it could actually be the same variety, but it was harvested at different times. So maybe it was harvested at the yellow stage instead of like the red stage. It could also be that they're actually different varieties. They're all chinense. So habanero, we call it a habanero type. So habanero is it's just like a group of peppers that look this way. But there are definitely many different types of varieties that could be different colors. And so again, even if you don't buy seeds from the Chili Pepper Institute, if you look through their catalog online, you can learn a lot about varieties and different types of peppers.
Someone else has a similar question about bell peppers. They've heard that red bell peppers are just green bell peppers that have ripened, but yellow and orange are actually different varieties. Is that true as well?
They could be different varieties. So like I have a green and a red. And so these two could actually be different varieties. If you were to leave this green one on the plant without picking, this would turn into either a yellow, orange, or red. So this red one went from green, probably yellow or orange, and then to red. So there are different, they go through these different colors, or they could be different varieties. Some varieties will only go to the yellow color and that's it. They'll never turn red.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So we are almost at our time together. I want to thank you for spending so much time and answering all of our questions for all of our chili heads out there. If folks want to stay in touch with the Chili Pepper Institute, with you, they want to learn more about chilies, where can folks, go online, or are there things you can recommend for them to read or anything like that?
So on my webpage, I actually have all of my journal articles and I have them linked. And I have a lot of articles about chili nutrition, chili capsaicin compounds. And so if you go to my website, which is aces.nmsu.edu/Guzman, which is Guzman, then you can find all of my publications there. You can also just Google Chili Pepper Institute, New Mexico State University, and you'll get to their website as well. You can also email me. I get a lot of emails asking questions. My email address is V as in Victor, GUZ as in zebra, M as in Mary, N as in Nancy at nmsu.edu. And I can also help answer any questions you have about chilies.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much for your time and being with us this afternoon. And thanks to our audience for tuning in. This is the end of our Beyond the Elements chemistry series. So thank you so much for tuning in, asking your great questions. These events wouldn't be possible without you. And if you want to see more, watch Beyond the Elements reactions to learn a little bit more about capsaicin and watch David Pogue go through a hot pepper eating contest. He definitely reaches that threshold. So you can see that on Nova's website or on the PBS video app. And while you're on Nova's site, you can find Beyond the Elements chemistry resources, like all 3 episodes of the series for free, our Reactions Interactive, where you'll get to explore some of the most common chemical reactions that you can see on our planet, as well as a collection of video resources on PBS Learning Media for both formal and informal educators. So if you're interested in more virtual field trips that we host, we usually do one a month. Make sure to follow Nova Education on Facebook or Twitter, or sign up for our free newsletter to get updates on future virtual field trip series. And with that, thank you again for joining us. Have a lovely afternoon, and hopefully we will see you all soon. Thanks, everybody.